The Kentucky sky burned crimson as the sun dipped below the rolling hills, casting long shadows over the endless fields of bluegrass. In Lexington, where thoroughbred horses galloped under the watchful eyes of trainers and the air carried the sweet scent of hay, Cameron Holt sat motionless in the study of his childhood home. At 37, with 17 years as a communications officer in the United States Army, he was no stranger to pressure. Coordinating intel transmissions in the blistering heat of a Middle Eastern forward operating base had hardened him, but nothing had prepared him for the weight of the papers in his hands, their crisp edges cutting into his calloused fingers like a betrayal made tangible. Cameron's dark brown eyes, framed by faint lines earned from years of squinting through desert sandstorms, scanned the document again. The Holt family trust, established by his father, a career military man who valued legacy above all, had been altered. Not just tweaked, but gutted and restructured. His mother, Evelyn, now 82 and prone to repeating herself, had been demoted to a secondary beneficiary. In her place, Marissa, Cameron's wife of 8 years, was named primary trustee, with full control over the family's most sacred asset, a 2-story wooden house and 15 acres of pristine Kentucky countryside, passed down through 3 generations. The date on the document, introduction item, stared back at him like an accusation. The house creaked under the weight of its own history, the oak floors polished by decades of footsteps. Outside, crickets chirped in the cooling September night, their song mingling with the distant hum of a tractor. Cameron's fingers tightened around the folder, his jaw clenching as he read the notary stamp again, signed, sealed, delivered. While he was 7,000 miles away, dreaming of Kentucky's green fields and his mother's apple pie. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was a violation of everything his father had stood for. "This land stays in the family," his father had said, voice rough with lung cancer in his final days. Non-negotiable, Cameron. "Everything okay in there?" Marissa's voice floated from the doorway, light and casual, as if she were asking about the weather. She leaned against the frame, blonde hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, her diamond earrings anniversary gift from 2 years ago, catching the lamplight. She wore a navy blazer over a white silk blouse, her work attire from Sundale Financial, where she managed portfolios for Lexington's elite. Cameron slid the papers back into the folder, his movements deliberate. "Just going through some things," he said, keeping his voice even. Marissa stepped into the room, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood. "Your mom's finances were a mess," she said, her tone helpful, almost rehearsed. "I organized everything while you were gone. Someone had to step in." He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. His eyes flicked to her hands, manicured and unblemished, so different from his own, scarred from years of handling equipment in the field. "I've been paying all her bills, handling the property taxes," Marissa continued, crossing her arms. "The trust needed updating. Your mother agreed completely." In the living room, the blare of a game show cut through the silence, the volume cranked up to accommodate Evelyn's fading hearing. Cameron pictured his mother, small and frail, sitting in her favorite armchair, her gray curls illuminated by the TV's glow. Their last video calls from the base had been strained. Evelyn confused about what day it was, mixing up names, her voice trembling when she couldn't find the right words. Marissa had always been there, in the background, smiling, reassuring him that everything was fine. "Thanks for keeping things organized," Cameron said finally, forcing a smile. "I need a little time to adjust to being home." Marissa's lips curved upward, a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course. Take all the time you need." She turned and left, her footsteps fading down the hall. Cameron waited until he heard the faint click of the bedroom door before exhaling. He stood, the folder still in hand, and stepped onto the back porch. The night air was crisp, carrying the earthy scent of damp soil and oak. He sank into a wooden rocking chair, the one his father had built decades ago, and stared at the silhouettes of the old oak trees against the starlit sky. His mind churned, replaying Marissa's words, the document's date, his mother's confusion. This wasn't a mistake, it was calculated. He thought of his father, a man who believed the loudest person in the room was rarely the strongest. "Watch the quiet ones, Cameron," he'd said, his voice steady even as cancer ate away at him. "They're the ones with plans." Cameron sipped from a bottle of bourbon he'd grabbed from the kitchen, the burn grounding him. He wasn't ready to confront Marissa, not yet, but he knew one thing. He'd protect his mother and the land, no matter the cost. Cameron met Marissa 10 years ago at a coffee shop near Fort Campbell where he was stationed. She was a vision, sharp-witted, ambitious, with a smile that made you feel like the only person in the room. They married within a year, her confidence complementing his quiet resolve. Marissa got along with Evelyn from the start, bringing her flowers, helping with errands, earning Cameron's gratitude, especially after his father's death 5 years ago. His father had been the planner, the one who ensured everything was in order. Take care of your mother, he'd told Cameron on his last day. The house and land stay in the family, that's non-negotiable. The trust his father set up was meant to be ironclad, protecting the house, the land, and the investments. $400,000, 0 cents, built over decades of careful saving. But Marissa had always chafed at their modest life, renting a small apartment in Lexington while the family land sat wasted, as she put it. "We could build our own house there," she'd say, her eyes bright with visions of modern architecture and sprawling lawns. Cameron always refused. The land was Evelyn's home, her sanctuary. She'd live out her days there as his father wanted. His deployments had grown more frequent over the past 3 years, each one stretching longer, the distance between him and home widening. Every time he returned, he noticed changes. Evelyn more dependent on Marissa, her checkbook handed over, her medication schedule managed, her doctor's appointments arranged. "She's getting forgetful," Marissa would say, her voice dripping with concern. "She needs the help, Cameron." It made sense, until it didn't. The next morning, Cameron kissed Marissa goodbye as she left for work, her briefcase swinging confidently. "I'm spending the day with Mom," he said, slipping the trust documents into his jacket pocket. She didn't notice, her mind already on her clients. He drove Evelyn to Bellamy's Diner, a small, checkered-floored joint where his parents used to go every Sunday after church. The smell of fried bacon and coffee filled the air, and the jukebox played a soft Merle Haggard tune. Evelyn smiled as they slid into a vinyl booth, her hands trembling slightly as she sipped water. "How are you really doing, Mom?" Cameron asked after they ordered. Pancakes for her, eggs for him. "Oh, getting by," she said, her voice frail but warm. "Marissa's been so helpful." "I saw the trust was changed," Cameron said, keeping his tone light. "The papers you signed a few months back, about the house and land?" Evelyn frowned, her brow furrowing. "Papers?" "Marissa brings me so many to sign, bills and such. She explains them, but—" She trailed off, her eyes distant. "I get mixed up sometimes." Cameron's stomach tightened. "What kind of papers?" "Insurance, bank things," Evelyn said vaguely. "She says it's to protect the assets while you're away, that you'd want her to handle the finances." She leaned forward, her voice dropping. "Did I do something wrong, Cameron?" He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "No, Mom, you didn't do anything wrong." On the drive home, Evelyn dozed in the passenger seat, her head resting against the window. Cameron pulled out his phone and called an old Army buddy, now an attorney in Louisville. Keeping his voice low, he explained the trust, Evelyn's confusion, and Marissa's role. "Don't confront her yet," his friend advised. "We need to see how far this goes." 3 days later, Cameron found the bank statements. He hadn't been looking for them specifically. He was in Evelyn's bedroom helping her sort through old photo albums when she mentioned a nice statement Marissa had brought over. "From the bank," Evelyn said. "Marissa says the investments are doing well." Cameron's pulse quickened. "Can I see it, Mom?" She pointed to her nightstand, and he opened the drawer, finding a folder labeled Financials. Inside were statements from 3 accounts he'd never seen. 2 were joint accounts between Marissa and Evelyn, with Marissa holding withdrawal privileges. The 3rd was a brokerage account where the family's $400,000, 0 cents, in long-term investments had been transferred. His hands went cold as he flipped through the pages. Over the past 6 months, $78, 0 cents, had been withdrawn in increments of $5, 0 cents, to $15, 0 cents. The withdrawal slips bore Eveline's shaky signature. He sat on the edge of the bed, papers spread around him like evidence at a crime scene. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. It was methodical, planned. Evelyn stood in the doorway, watching him with worried eyes. "Are the numbers good?" she asked. "Marissa says not to worry about the details." Cameron gathered the statements, forcing a smile. "Everything's fine, Mom. I'm just catching up." That night, Marissa suggested dinner to celebrate his return. They went to an upscale restaurant downtown, the kind with cloth napkins and a wine list longer than a novel. Marissa ordered champagne, her new dress shimmering under the chandeliers, her wrists adorned with bracelets Cameron didn't recognize. "You seem distracted," she said, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "Still adjusting?" "Just getting my bearings," he said, sipping water. "I've been thinking," she continued, eyes bright. "Now that you're home, we should talk about building on your mother's land. I've already spoken with an architect, just preliminary discussions." Cameron's grip tightened on his glass. "And what would happen to Mom?" "We'd take care of her, of course," Marissa said smoothly, "but that house is too big for her now. There's a lovely assisted living community near my office. Very exclusive." The pieces clicked into place. The trust, the accounts, the land. It was all part of a plan she'd been weaving for years, waiting for the moment when Evelyn was vulnerable and Cameron was too far away to notice. He didn't confront her, didn't raise his voice. Instead, he smiled and nodded as she described her vision for a modern home on his family's land, complete with a pool and a 3-car garage. "I think I need a few weeks to decompress," he said, cutting into his steak. "Get back into civilian rhythm before making big decisions." Her smile faltered, but she nodded. "Of course, take your time." He excused himself to the restroom and in the hallway called his attorney friend. "I need everything you've got on elder financial abuse and trust invalidation," he whispered, "and I need it yesterday." Walking back to the table, a strange calm settled over him. The weight of betrayal was heavy, but clarity sharpened his focus. Marissa thought she held all the cards. She was wrong. A week later, Cameron scheduled an appointment with Harold Lerner, an estate attorney in Louisville specializing in elder law. He drove the 60 miles alone, telling Marissa he was meeting Army buddies. Harold's office, lined with law books and smelling of leather, felt like a war room. "Your mother was likely coerced," Harold said after reviewing the trust documents and bank statements, "but proving it won't be simple. Did she have a cognitive assessment when these were signed?" "Not that I know of," Cameron said, leaning forward. "But she's been forgetting things, names, dates, repeating questions." Harold nodded. "We'll need a geriatric specialist to evaluate her current condition. If she's showing cognitive decline now, we can argue it was present when she signed." Cameron left with a plan. The next day, he took Evelyn to Dr. Eleanor Jenkins, a specialist in geriatric medicine. After a series of tests, Dr. Jenkins confirmed early-stage dementia, likely developing for at least 18 months. "Has anyone else noticed these symptoms?" she asked. "My wife," Cameron replied. "She's been handling Mom's affairs while I was deployed." Dr. Jenkins frowned. "And she never sought a medical evaluation?" "Apparently not." Armed with the diagnosis, Cameron decided to approach Marissa not with accusations, but with questions. That evening they sat in the kitchen after Evelyn went to bed. "I took Mom to a specialist today," he began, stirring his coffee. "She's showing signs of dementia." Marissa's expression shifted, a flicker of unease crossing her face. "That's awful, but not surprising. I've noticed her memory issues for some time." "Before or after she signed the trust amendment?" Cameron asked, his voice steady. Her eyes narrowed. "What are you implying, Cameron?" "Just trying to establish a timeline," he said, "for the doctors." "I've done nothing but help your mother while you were gone," she snapped. "Who do you think has been here, day after day?" "You're right," he said, nodding. "I appreciate everything you've done. I'm just concerned about some financial decisions, the trust amendments, the new joint accounts, the withdrawals." Marissa stood abruptly, grabbing her keys. "I don't appreciate being interrogated, Cameron, not after everything I've sacrificed." She stormed out, the door slamming behind her. Cameron sat alone, the house settling around him. He wasn't surprised. She'd deflected, just as he'd expected. But he was ready to dig deeper. The next morning, a call from his bank jolted him awake. Someone had tried to access his personal savings account. One Marissa's name wasn't on. using incorrect passwords. The attempt failed, but the timing was no coincidence. That afternoon, rummaging through Evelyn's desk for more clues, Cameron found a certified letter from Cornerstone Assisted Living, confirming Evelyn's residency with a move-in date next month. The contract bore her signature, dated 3 days after his return. He showed it to Evelyn, who looked bewildered. "I don't remember this place," she said. "Did I agree to move?" "Marissa says you did," Cameron replied, watching her face. Evelyn shook her head. "I don't want to leave my home, Cameron. I promised your father I'd stay here." That night, Cameron changed the passwords on all his accounts and placed a credit freeze. He called Harold again. "It's worse than we thought," he said, "and I think she knows I'm on to her." 2 days later, he drove to the county clerk's office to see the original trust amendment. The clerk, a silver-haired woman named Glenda, pulled the file. Cameron's blood ran cold when he saw the notary stamp. Lauren Davis, from Westbrook Law, where Marissa's college roommate, Vanessa Westbrook, was a partner, a connection Marissa had never mentioned. "Do you know this notary?" Cameron asked. Glenda adjusted her glasses. "Lauren? She's been at Westbrook Law for years." Cameron thanked her and drove to the law firm. The receptionist said Vanessa was in court, but Lauren was available. Lauren, a nervous woman in her 30s, paled when Cameron introduced himself. "You're Marissa's husband," she said, avoiding his eyes. "You notarized a trust amendment for my mother 6 months ago," he said. She nodded. "I did. Everything was in order." "Was my mother alone when she signed?" Lauren hesitated. "I don't recall specifically." "Let me help you," Cameron said, his voice low. "Was my wife present?" "I really can't discuss." "My mother has dementia," he cut in. "Documented dementia. That amendment stripped her of assets she's held for decades, and it happened while I was deployed. Did you actually witness my mother sign, or did you just stamp a document Marissa brought you?" Lauren stood, her hands trembling. "This conversation is over." That evening, Cameron's phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. It was Vanessa Westbrook. "Cameron, we need to talk," she said, her voice tense. They met at a quiet cafe downtown. Vanessa, immaculate in a business suit, looked troubled. "Lauren told me about your visit," she began. "My firm takes notary standards seriously." "Did your firm draft the trust amendment?" Cameron asked. "No," she said, sighing. "Marissa brought it, already prepared. She said it was drafted by your family attorney, with your knowledge." "And my mother, was she there when it was notarized?" Vanessa looked down at her coffee. "No." "Marissa said your mother was ill and couldn't come. Lauren notarized it based on Marissa's assurance that your mother signed willingly." "That's illegal," Cameron said flatly. "It is," Vanessa admitted. "I've reported the violation to the State Bar Association. Lauren's been suspended." "Why tell me this?" "Because I've known Marissa since college and I never thought she'd—" She trailed off. "There's more, Cameron. Last year she asked me about liquidating property and transferring funds offshore. I thought it was for a client. Now I'm not sure." Cameron's mind raced. Offshore accounts, property sales, the assisted living contract. How long had she been planning this? "One more thing," Vanessa said. 3 years ago, Marissa asked about divorce proceedings, military pensions, and how deployments affect spousal support. The revelation hit like a punch. 3 years ago, when his deployments intensified. "Thank you," Cameron said, standing. As he left, he called Harold. "I need to move quickly," he said. "She's been working on this for years." Cameron didn't confront Marissa. Instead, he played the part of the adjusting veteran, smiling through dinners as she talked about renovations, nodding when she suggested selling part of the land to fund Mom's care. Meanwhile, he built his case. Dr. Jenkins provided a detailed report on Evelyn's dementia. Cameron hired a private investigator who uncovered Marissa's secret apartment in Louisville, leased under her maiden name, Donovan, 6 months ago. The investigator also documented her spending: designer clothes, lunches with real estate developers, meetings with a luxury home builder. 10 days later, Harold called with news. "The judge granted temporary guardianship of your mother," he said. "We've secured a hearing next week to contest the trust amendment. Cameron moved his belongings to the guest room, blaming sleep issues from deployment. The truth was, he couldn't bear sleeping beside her. 3 days before the hearing, the investigator sent a flash drive with financial records Marissa had tried to delete, transfers from Evelyn's accounts to pay off $40,000, 0 cents, in personal credit card debt. That evening, Marissa approached him in the kitchen. "We need to talk about your mother," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "The assisted living facility needs an answer by Friday." "I'm not sure that's the right move," Cameron said. She sighed. "Cameron, be realistic. She can't live alone, and we can't care for someone with dementia." "We've managed so far." "That's because I've been handling everything," she said, irritation creeping in. "The facility is top-notch, and the trust will cover it." "The trust," Cameron repeated. "The one you had her sign while I was deployed?" Something flashed in her eyes. Fear, perhaps, then vanished. "I did what needed to be done," she said. "Someone had to make decisions." "I'd like to explore other options," he said. "What was the deposit amount?" Her smile tightened. $15,000 to secure her spot, from her account, not ours. "Don't worry." He nodded, filing away the lie. The next morning, he visited Cornerstone Assisted Living. The director confirmed a $5,000 0 cents deposit, not $15, 0 cents, and no waiting list. $10,000 unaccounted for. Another piece of the puzzle. Cameron finalized details with Harold, compiling all evidence, bank records, medical reports, the investigator's findings. The hearing was set, and Marissa would learn of it when served papers. That night he sat on the porch, bourbon in hand, watching the oaks sway. For the first time in weeks, he felt peace. Not victory, but resolve. The land would stay in the family, his mother would be safe, and Marissa would face the consequences of her betrayal.